Tonight on The Buzz, we are talking about intriguing ideas that caught our attention. From new camera gear to new ways of working in the cloud to whether spending more money for a commercial creates a better commercial. First, though, we start with news. OWC announced this week they've acquired 3 new companies. Tonight, we talk with Jennifer Soulé, president of OWC, about who they acquired and why. Next, Ned Soltz, contributing editor to Red Shark News, looks at things we can hang on our camera and things we can hang our camera on. Next, Michael Kammes is fascinated by how the cloud can improve media workflows. However, as he explains tonight, the cloud requires us to think differently from what we're doing now. Next, Philip Hodgetts, CEO of Lumberjack System, was intrigued by whether spending more money for production makes a difference in the message. Philip reports on Wistia.com's experiment to create the same commercial with budgets of $1K, $10K, and $100K. The results were surprising. All this, plus a special tribute to Norman Hollyn, and as always, James DeRuvo presents our weekly doddleNEWS update. The buzz starts now.
Since the dawn of digital filmmaking,
authoritative,
one show serves a worldwide network of media professionals,
current,
uniting industry experts,
production,
filmmakers,
post-production,
and content creators around the planet.
Distribution.
From the media capital of the world in Los Angeles, California, the Digital Production Buzz goes live now.
Welcome to the Digital Production Buzz, the world's longest-running podcast for the creative content industry, covering media production, post-production, and marketing around the world. Hi, my name is Larry Jordan. In this intensely quiet period before the start of this year's NAB show, I thought it would be interesting to look at media technology in a different way. Interesting ideas that caught the attention of our regulars. Ned Soltz, I discovered, is fascinated by the gear that attaches to our cameras. Michael Kammes is struck by how the cloud requires us to think differently. And Philip Hodgetts was captivated by a recent series of documentaries on what happens when you shoot the same commercial with 3 different production budgets. All intriguing ideas. By the way, if you enjoy The Buzz, please give us a positive rating and review in the iTunes Store. We appreciate your support to help us grow our audience. And now it's time for our weekly doddleNEWS update with James DeRuvo. Hello, James.
Hello, Larry.
What's the news this week?
Cupertino gives us updates to both hardware and software. The first thing that came out today, Apple updated Final Cut Pro, compressor, and motion with key updates and bug fixes. The biggest feature is that version 10.4.6 of Final Cut Pro, plus the latest versions of compressor and motion, will now automatically detect media files that may be incompatible with future versions of macOS after Mojave. It'll then convert them to a compatible 64-bit format. There will also be several fixes to issues where share destinations and workflow extension buttons will just disappear out of nowhere. And there are also several other annoying bug fixes and housekeeping updates. All 3 applications will improve reliability in sharing your files to YouTube.
So what's your view of the update?
While most of version 10.4.6 is a mere housekeeping update, fixing several annoying bugs, the big feature of this update is Apple taking steps to automatically identify and reformat legacy codecs so that users can prepare for a future after macOS Mojave. This will give all Final Cut Pro, motion, and compressor users a leg up in future-proofing their old legacy media.
Apple announced at the Worldwide Developer Conference last year, 2018, that Mojave would be the last that supports 32 bits. So for developers, this is not new news, but for all of us users, we're still panicking to make sure things are going to work. What especially impresses me here is that we can use Compressor, which is a $50 program, and use it to convert legacy media. For instance, Premiere users can use this, or Avid users can use it as a way of doing your conversion. Even if you don't edit with Final Cut, Compressor Makes is something that all of us could take advantage of.
And do it automatically.
So that's our first Apple story. What's number 2?
Well, Apple yesterday announced what could be the last Intel-based iMac refresh. 4K and 5K iMacs get a modest boost in performance with 8th and 9th generation Coffee Lake processors. The iMacs will receive the AMD Radeon Pro 500X GPUs, with the 4K iMac receiving 4 gigabytes of VRAM on the Radeon Pro, while the 5K iMac will receive 8 gigabytes of VRAM on the Radeon Pro. And the 5K iMac users will also get the option of upgrading to the Radeon Pro Vega. iMac Pros will also get a tiny little update with the Radeon Vega upgrade option and up to 256 gigabytes of DDR4 EEC RAM for the processor.
So what's your take here?
Well, to tell you the truth, it's difficult to get excited about this last update. After waiting over 2 years for a refresh of the iMac lines, getting a processor that's at least 12 to 18 months old isn't really all that sexy, even if it does boost performance by promise 40 to 80%. This update, though, is clearly just a placeholder to placate the Apple faithful until their new Apple-designed processors come out in the iMac in 2020.
I agree. The update is nice, and by the way, spending more money for a GPU increases your speed, but doesn't increase your image quality. Still, the upgrade's minor.
And speaking of image quality, the display used in the both models is exactly the same as last year, as the previous model. So you're not really going to see any difference on the screen.
All good to know. What's our third story this week?
Nikon is now bundling their Z-series cameras with a free FTZ adapter. If you buy the Nikon Z7 or Z6 full-frame mirrorless camera, Nikon will throw in the FTZ lens adapter now for free. Before, you got $100 off. Now, the entire adapter will be included in your purchase, and that's a $250 value. The FTZ adapter also opens up the use for over 350 f-mount Nikkor lenses, plus an additional 90 other lenses in the Nikon line.
So why do you think Nikon's doing this?
Well, while the hype for the Z-series full-frame mirrorless and camera was pretty huge, and admittedly, the footage is pretty impressive, the word on the street is that this hasn't translated into the kind of sales figures that Nikon was hoping for. The thinking is likely that Nikon users are balking at having to reinvest in another round of new glass, especially when some of the best glass that Nikon makes is up to 40 years old, and they didn't want to have to pay for an adapter to use it. So Nikon is pulling out all the stops and adding this FTZ adapter free as part of the bundling purchase in order to lure those users and get some more sales.
James, what other stories are you and your team working on this week?
Other stories we're following include NVIDIA is using artificial intelligence to create photorealistic real-life images from simple doodles and sketches. Apple resurrects the iPad Air and iPad Mini with new A12 Bionic models. And the filming of that Apollo 11 documentary I mentioned last week required literally reinventing the film scanning reel to handle thousands of hours of unseen 65 millimeter and 70 millimeter footage. And in doing so, they probably saved a valuable historical artifact, the footage itself.
And where can we go on the web to learn more?
All these stories and more can be found at doddleNEWS.com.
And James DeRuvo is the editor-in-chief of doddleNEWS and joins us every week. We'll see you next Thursday.
See you next Thursday.
Jen Soulé is the president of Otherworld Computing. She's been with OWC for 21 years, starting on the sales team in 1997. She's a strong advocate for OWC's green initiatives, including alternative energy, a corporate recycling program, and water and packaging efficiencies. Hello, Jen. Welcome.
Oh, hi, Larry. Thank you. It's great to be here.
You know, I was just thinking, normally we talk with Larry O'Connor, but you are the brains of the operation, so let's get right to the news. What did OWC announce this week?
On the product side, we announced our memory for the brand new iMacs that'll be shipping in, I think a week now. And also wanted to announce our overall expansion into both Asia and Europe, as well as here within the U.S.
What did you do in terms of the expansion? I understand you acquired 3 companies. What did you acquire?
2 of the companies are related, an Extron and Key.io. So Key.io is sort of the brand that people would be familiar with. They sell external storage solutions and docks, a lot of eGPU and PCI expansion boxes. And then the engineering arm that's in Taiwan, it was under the name Extron. So essentially 2 different companies purchased the US side and then the Taiwan side. And then a separate distribution company that we bought in Belgium to better support our European customers.
I can understand the benefit of buying a European distributor. That distribution is always good, but OWC's been making storage since the beginning of time. Why were you interested in bringing in a Key.io?
Always been pretty impressed with their engineering and production quality. Something I think we've done really well as well, but there's just a little more polish on some of the designs and how they were able to accomplish it in production. And I think a lot of that was how close their engineering and production is to the supply chain. So for us, that really became a key element. We had a small engineering team in the U.S., but it was largely bolstered by a lot of our partners overseas. So now, sort of, instead of being bolstered by partners, it's bolstered by ourselves.
So what are your plans now that you've got these 3 new companies under the hood? What's going forward?
Let's start with for customers. For our customers, they're going to see on the support side, our European and Asian customers are going to have better sales support, better customer service, better tech support, because it'll be on the ground in the same language and in the same time zone, which obviously gets rid of a lot of delays. They'll also see an improvement in the availability of the product on both the continents, both OWC and a Key.io. Key.io will remain a brand, but a lot of that product is going to end up folding in under the OWC brand. From a product perspective, people can expect to see faster, products coming out faster from us, as we can kind of control more of the process from the idea all the way to the production. I think with the additional engineering, both on the hardware and software side, we already were working toward really pulling those together, and you'll see that accelerate. So you'll see more full hardware software solutions coming out of us over the course of the next year.
What is it that's most exciting about these acquisitions for you?
Well, for me, it's just seeing the company really be able to expand in these critical areas. When you have a sales force, sitting here passionate about the product in the U.S., the messaging doesn't necessarily come across. There's idiosyncrasies in every geographical region and every country. And we didn't, frankly, sell well into Asia. And it's like 60% of the world's population. So in particular, that aspect of really being able to convey like what's exciting about OWC products and talking to customers and hearing their story, that part really excites me. And then also tying in the engineering and expanding the engineering capability, because we have so many ideas and sometimes have them limited by that capability. So now that we have a much bigger team, then we're going to be able to do more. So I'm kind of excited about both those aspects.
And Jen, for people that want to learn more about the products that OWC has, where can they go on the web?
OWC.com, so nice and easy, OWC.com, and that really kind of talks through a lot of the different brands that we have, and it's a jumping off point to take you to MacSales.com if you're looking for specific products you're looking at buying right now, both OWC, Key.io, and other brands that are of particular interest to Mac customers. And then also, of course, it will lead you to a Key.io, SoftRaid, Media4, all the different brands that we carry, and that are now under the OWC moniker.
That website is 3 letters, OWC.com, OWC.com, and Jen Soulé is the president of Otherworld Computing. And Jen, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, Larry, thank you so much for having me.
Join the digital production buzz at the 2019 NAB show in Las Vegas, Nevada. Starting Monday, April 8th, Larry Jordan and the Buzz team are taking their microphones on the road to cover the latest news and trends from the largest media show in the world. Every hour of every day, The Buzz is live on the trade show floor, creating 27 new shows in 4 days. More than 100 interviews with key industry leaders. The Buzz has webcast directly from NAB for 11 years, with legendary coverage that's heard in more than 195 countries around the world. If you're attending the show, visit us at booth SL10527 and say hello, or join us live every day of the show at nabshowbuzz.com. Join us as The Buzz covers NAB 2019 live at nabshowbuzz.com.
Ned Soltz is a contributing editor to Red Shark News. He's also an author, editor, educator, and consultant on all things related to digital video. Best of all, he's a regular here on The Buzz. Hello, Ned. Welcome back.
Hi, Larry. It's wonderful to be back. I was waiting for the call. I haven't been on the show in a few weeks, and I was hoping that I would be shown a little love, and now here it is. So it's good to be with you.
I would have called you sooner, but I just had to talk to a couple of other people first.
Oh, okay. I can understand that.
It has nothing to do with a lack of love, Ned. Oh, my goodness, no. You are deeply appreciated. Ned, you've given us an interesting hook when you wrote that you were going to talk about things to hang your camera on and things to hang onto your camera. Let's start with the things that hang on cameras. What's caught your eye?
Well, what's been catching my eye lately is a lot of this small but powerful lighting. And I'll mention two brands in particular. I've got the whole new Lytra kit sitting right here in front of me, as a matter of fact. And then there are also new offerings from LumaCube. And these are two very impressive little lights. They're not very expensive. We're talking in the $100 range, but particularly with the Lytra, I'm looking at it now where there is a softbox attachment. There's barn doors. There are diffusers. They have variable color temperature and intensities, and the light is very true. It's excellent and very high lumen. These are impressive little lights.
Now, there were two companies you mentioned. Which were the company names again?
Lytra and LumaCube.
Have you worked with the LumaCube? I have been getting emails from them about 5 times a day. So their marketing is aggressive, but I have not yet had a chance to buy any. Have you played with them yet?
Yes, I've played with them. I would say Lytra and LumaCube are pretty much the same quality of light. They each have their own little hooks. The LumaCube is waterproof and a little more sealed. The Lytra just projects its light a little differently, but in practicality, they really both are going to be about the same. It's a matter of just what your own personal preference might be. Both are going to have a maximum life of really a little over an hour, but if you run them at full power, it will be less. There's USB charging. However, if you have a camera that has a USB output on it, that also provides power. You could power your little light from that.
Well, the LumaCube is the size of a children's building block. It's about a 1-inch square. Is it really generate enough light to be able to illuminate anything besides itself?
It puts out a lot of light. Both the Lytra and the LumaCube are about the same size. It puts out up to 1,500 lumens. But, again, for an on-camera light, you're really not looking to light an auditorium or light an entire set. This is for fill or for facial lighting for interviews or relatively small areas for documentary or handheld work. That's with really any on-camera light. Nobody has quite come out with a full HMI 2,000 watt equivalent to hang on your camera.
I'd be afraid to turn that one on, I think.
That's right, yeah. But seriously, I think particularly where you have options for these now that range from barn doors to diffusers with the softbox, for example. These can be very nice interview lights on your camera if you're really operating as a solo operator and run and gun and don't have the luxury of being able to come up with a multiple light setup.
Cool. All right. Well, let's hear something else. What else you got?
Well, there also are, of course, microphones. In the low end of things, inexpensive, that Rode video mic has been around for ages, and it's a pretty good piece of audio equipment for the money, and certainly very useful for mirrorless / DSLR shooters. If you are obviously looking at higher level mics, of course, those can always be hung onto that camera as well. Even with small mixers that you could attach on it, I still have a Sound Devices Mixed 3D. It's a two mic mixer. It's a pretty expensive thing, but Sound Devices are not exactly a cheap product. However, you very much get what you pay for with it. You can hang a little mixer onto the camera and be able to mix two mics. So I think on-camera audio is important. But then as well, look at a company called Tether Tools. They make all kinds of interesting things, from power adapters to something that they call a jerk stopper for cables, particularly if you're having to deal with HDMI cables coming in and out of your camera. There's no locking on that whatsoever, just like the old FireWire cables. Remember that? We're old enough to remember FireWire. Things can pull out very easily.
I'm quite old enough to remember FireWire. Thank you very much.
The worst of it was that 4-pin Sony cable. That engineer should have just been thrown off of Mount Fuji for coming up with that 4-pin cable. And they always pulled out. But now with Tether Tools and other manufacturers as well, there are stoppers to be able to secure that cable, and a variety of arms. And don't forget, if you have a wireless mic, to be able to put a holder on that full wireless mics, which brings me to the fact that if you are going to be hanging gear on your camera, regardless of a mirrorless DSLR or a traditional video camera, really a good idea to have a cheese plate so that you have multiple attachment points for all of these mics and mounts and arms and everything else that you're going to be putting on these cameras.
Now, what did you call that again?
A cheese plate.
A cheese plate. Why a cheese plate?
Well, because it's got holes like Swiss cheese. We should call it a Swiss cheese plate or an Emmentaler cheese plate rather than just a cheese plate. But just something that has all the holes in it, and that's on most mounts. And most cameras today have a couple of mounting points on the camera itself or on the camera handle. But it's always good to have something with multiple mounting points.
Now,
and
does it just
be in a cage or just an add-on at the top of your camera?
Just so I understand, because I haven't worked with cheese plates for a long time, the camera mounts to this piece of aluminum that's got holes in it, and that's what mounts to the tripod?
Can mount on top of your camera.
Oh, on top of the camera.
It depends on the configuration, or it could be, like with the DSLRs and mirrorless particularly, cages are very popular. And on those cages, you're going to have cheese plate-like multiple attachment points. For example, in my FS7, I have one where the handle comes off of it, mount the cheese plate on top. You can mount the handle back on it. You have a number of different mounting points, particularly for articulating arms and things like that, where you may be wanting to mount lights or attach that wireless mic adapter.
Eric, who's listening in our live chat, is saying that he mounts his with rods to the rear of the camera just to be able to have more accessories attached.
Absolutely. That's another way of doing it. and particularly if you're going to be attaching batteries to it as well. That's another important thing that you may be wanting to attach is external batteries.
Well, let's just get a quick laundry list of the companies you've mentioned. You've mentioned LumaCube, and you've mentioned Tether Tools, and who else?
And I've mentioned Lytra. I've mentioned Rode. And there's some of the, there certainly are others. In terms of lighting, there's another lighting company that I want to mention. That's Aladdin. They have this great little eye light that's inexpensive, but really it's just a great thing to have on the camera for eye light and fill. And they have a few other camera mounts. They're a little, again, on the pricey side. But honestly, what I find is a bargain isn't a bargain if you don't get acceptable results out of it. So I don't necessarily look for the least expensive of products, particularly in lighting. Although LEDs are getting better, you still have to watch for color discrepancies and color fidelity and CRI and other things that measure the fidelity of your color.
Well, you make a good point. Saving money and ruining a scene is not a cost-effective way to save money.
Exactly. One of the things that I really try to advise people when they ask me about cameras and gear and getting started is really the camera is probably almost the smallest part of your investment. It's the lighting, it's the audio, it's what you hang on to that camera. And then as we can transition to the important thing is what you hang that camera onto.
And that we'll have to have a longer conversation about in the future. For people who want to keep track of what you're thinking and where you're writing, where can it go on the web?
The best place to find me these days is redsharknews.com. That's
all one word, redsharknews.com, redsharknews.com. And Ned Soltz is a contributing editor to Red Shark News. And Ned, thanks for joining us today.
And thanks for having me, Larry, and see you at NAB.
Take care. You will absolutely see you at NAB. Bye-bye. As Director of Business Development for Bebop Technology, Michael Kammes leverages his experience with creative technology and tools providers to accelerate growth and provide strategic perspective across marketing, sales, and partnerships. And best of all, he's a frequent and welcome contributor to The Buzz. Hello, Michael. Welcome back.
Good to hear your voice, Larry. Thank you very much.
This move to Bebop is relatively new. How's it going?
I tell you, some days you feel like a rock star, and other days you feel like the guy who's cleaning up after the rock stars. What's very interesting is that over the course of my career, it's been about getting a faster horse, right? More horsepower, faster storage, just incrementally make things better. Even moving from tape to tapeless was an incremental step. Now that I'm working at Bebop and everything is based around cloud methodologies, it's no longer trying to get a faster horse. It's introducing people to Teslas and cars. It's a complete different way of thinking.
That's what I want to talk about, because this week we're looking about interesting ideas that have caught our attention. What's an interesting idea that's occurred to you?
In retrospect, it almost seems like, why didn't I think of this earlier? In post-production especially, we've been relegated to the technology that is on our desktop or on the floor next to our desk or in a machine room that's down the hall. It's very rare that we leverage the power of data centers around the world to do a lot of the heavy lifting that we're still relying on our local machines for.
Yeah, but when you say heavy lifting, a data center is essentially a server that's located somewhere other than our site, but a server is being shared by multiple users. How does moving to a server help us? Because now we're time sharing.
No, that's a great way of looking at it, and I'll address the second part first. When you're dealing with data centers, yes, it's brokered time, but the work that you may need to do may not require you to have that investment of that $9,000 Mac Pro. You may be able to get by with paying a few dollars for compute time and then be done with it. So there is something to be said for the financials of something like that. The other angle is that when we look at these data centers, the machines that are in data centers are far faster than just about anything any of us are going to have on our desktop or again, even in our machine room. And so by leveraging the power of these machines, whether they're shared or not, to render faster, to export faster, to play back in real time what our local machine can't, and to use the bandwidth that these data centers already have to the internet at large, there's no reason we shouldn't offload all of those responsibilities to data centers instead of relying on what we have at home or at work.
I want to bypass the first mile, last mile speed challenge. Instead, I want to look at the workflow concept. Is our workflow the same if we're editing using locally attached storage versus editing versus the cloud?
That's a great question. And I think when folks try and look at using the cloud, the first immediate knee-jerk reaction is to use one of the great sites like Frame.io and even YouTube to some extent, where it's the last mile for the review and approve process. And that's a fantastic way of using the cloud, but that only augments what you're doing on-prem. You're still following the workflow you've been using for years. When we start introducing the cloud into post-production workflows, we have to look at, well, do we want to push high-res media up to the cloud and edit with that? Sure, it'll take longer, but the machines up in the cloud can handle it faster, can render it faster, and then you can deliver from the cloud as opposed to bringing the media back down to wherever you're working and push it out from there.
It sounds to me that a good alternative would be a proxy workflow. Store the high-res media locally, feed proxies to the cloud, and use the power of the cloud for proxy editing.
No, you're completely right. If you want to cut down on the time it takes to upload, you can certainly utilize proxies. And then you can localize the project file and reconnect to the high-res. And in that case, then it falls somewhat into our more traditional offline and online process. However, if you're uploading proxies, you now are stuck with what proxies are in the cloud, which means you always have to localize. We also look at things like disaster recovery and just simple backups. If you're working on-prem and your non-rated drive goes down or your SAN, a drive goes dead, unless you've got backup somewhere, you're in a really, really tough spot. If you're working in the cloud, traditionally, there's snapshotting, there's backups, there's what they call 5 nines uptime or 99.999% uptime. So while there is a longer upload time with media, you have all these fringe benefits, including disaster recovery, already in the cloud.
Should I mention last week's Facebook outage of multiple hours in terms of 99999 reliability?
I believe that was for Facebook. It wasn't for where media is usually stored in an editable fashion like Amazon or Google or Microsoft.
Oh, all right. Well, then I won't mention it then. Where do you see the best use of the cloud? Is it really the editorial process? Is it more in review and approval? Is it more in distribution? I mean, do we really have to commit our entire workflow to the cloud, or can we pick and choose?
You can certainly pick and choose, and you can certainly have hybrid workflows because the cloud, as you pointed out, isn't perfect in every aspect. For example, if you want to grade something on a server in a data center, if you're doing high-end grading, you're going to need something that can transmit that from a data center in real time. And right now, that's only in theoretical deployments. It's not something that we can just turn on and it just works. So there has to be some concessions somewhere.
What's the best option? If we're nervous about the cloud, where should we start dipping our toe into the water?
I think a lot of folks will dip their toes in the cloud water by saying, okay, maybe I'll use TeamViewer, or maybe I'll use Remote Desktop, or maybe I'll use any of these free or almost free apps for my media workflow. And I think what most people have to realize is that many of these tools are not meant for the niche media and entertainment industry. So it's important to find cloud tools that are optimized for media and entertainment and then exploit those as opposed to trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
What are some tasks that the cloud is eminently suited for?
That's a good question, Larry. Workflows are a lot like dominoes or houses of cards, right? If you move one, then you may move all of them, and that can be disastrous. So if you're looking for something that the cloud can do well, that isn't a big change or burden to what you're doing now, then review and approve. And I think a lot of services have already done that. All right. I've already mentioned Frame.io among a handful of others that are already doing this to facilitate that review and approve process. However, if you look at data centers, they have more horsepower than you could ever have. So their best job is for the rendering and is for the exporting of media. The problem with that is for you to utilize rendering in the cloud, you have to have a good chunk of media up there as well, or some kind of proprietary application which can render in the cloud and then localize those results without too much impact to your workflow. And unfortunately, there are not a lot of services out there that can do that for creative editorial.
You've been involved in workflow since you and I first met many, many years ago. And now you're really working for a company which is focused on cloud services. What is it about the cloud that most excites you?
The fact that it's brand new. And when I say brand new, I mean brand new for the media and entertainment industry. If we look at some of the leaders in our industry in terms of creative software, we look at things like Avid, right? Their cloud offering is just beginning. If we look at companies like Apple in terms of creative editorial, they're not even doing a lot that's public, I should say. And then we look at Adobe, who has been dipping their toe in the cloud for years, but still doesn't have a complete cloud solution. So it's very exciting to see these tools that I've worked with for decades that drive our creative industry in terms of technology. And for them not to have a solution, that means it's new technology. And I'm uber excited to see where it goes.
Are you really that hopeful about media in the cloud?
I am. My biggest concern is that we're too early. My concern is that the bandwidth that we're afforded here in the U.S. will not increase significantly enough to make this viable, but the tech is there, the tech works. I really feel it's going to be the future, just whether we're too early.
Michael, for people that want to keep track of what you're thinking and doing, where can they go on the web?
Couple different places. You can go to michaelkammes.com. You can also check out 5thingsseries.com. That's the number 5. And lastly, beboptechnology.com.
Let's do my favorite website, which is Michael Kammes, MichaelKammes, michaelkammes.com, and the number 5thingsseries.com. And Michael, thanks for your time.
Thank you for yours, Larry. Take care.
Here's another website I want to introduce you to, doddleNEWS.com. DoddleNEWS gives you a portal into the broadcast, video, and film industries. It's a leading online resource presenting news, reviews, and products for the film and video industry. DoddleNEWS also offers a resource guide and crew management platform specifically designed for production. These digital call sheets, along with their app, directory, and premium listings, provide in-depth organizational tools for busy production professionals. DoddleNEWS is a part of the Thalo Arts community, a worldwide community of artists, filmmakers, and storytellers. From photography to filmmaking, performing arts to fine arts, and everything in between, Thalo is filled with resources you need to succeed. Whether you want the latest industry news, need to network with other creative professionals, or require state-of-the-art online tools to manage your next project, there's only one place to go, doddleNEWS.com. Philip Hodgetts is recognized as a leading technologist, as well as the CEO of Lumberjack System. Even better, he's a regular here on The Buzz, where, to my eternal gratitude, he specializes in explaining new technology. Hello, Philip. Welcome back.
Hi, Larry.
Philip, this week we're talking about interesting ideas that caught our attention. What's caught yours?
What I found really caught my attention lately was this documentary series from a company called Wistia out of Boston. The documentary series has the premise that if we took the same general idea, a 90-second promotional piece for Wistia's software, And we did it for a $1,000 budget, we did it for a $10,000 budget, and we did it for a $100,000 budget. How would that look different at the end, and how would the process be different? And I've always found this intersection of budget and quality very interesting, particularly in an era where within 10 feet of me, I probably have 6 HD cameras that would have been of a quality I would have died for in the early part of my career.
Well, Wistia is an online company that creates video software for growing businesses. What was their ad about?
Their ad is about one of their pieces of software called Soapbox, which is a Google Chrome plugin so that you can record both the computer's camera and the screen at the same time. And then in the Soapbox software, you can lay out how you want those to go, whether you want to be on screen, whether you want the screen or some combination to go together. And so this is the piece of software that all three promotional pieces reference this software. They kind of build on each other, the three pieces, but they're all still a Soapbox promotional piece.
So tell me what they did. $1,000 for the production budget, production and post, $10,000 and $100,000. What did they do for $1,000?
Well, each one was shot in a day, and they were all done by Sandwich Video. So the same creative company did all three promotional pieces. For $1,000, you get one person for one day. You get an iPhone taped to the computer. You get shooting in carefully chosen but available light, and some very, very basic hand-cut-out paper graphics to carry the message.
So in other words, it looked really cheesy and cheap.
Well, no, it didn't. They actually managed to give it a fairly decent look. It didn't look cheesy and cheap, but when you see it in context of the higher budget pieces later, you really see its deficiencies. But standing up by itself, it doesn't feel like it's been done incredibly cheaply. It's certainly been done on a low budget, but it doesn't feel cheap.
All right, let's move up to the $10,000 version. What are the differences between that and the 1K version?
Same director, the person who was the solo person in the first one, but we get now a director and a crew of 9 people in total. We get a little bit classier camera, which is a Canon C300, and we get a lighting kit and somebody to look after the lighting and somebody to do professional audio. We do a little bit of lighting, but we don't do much set decoration. We do a bit of basic clothing and makeup and a lot of lighting, and that's what you get for $10,000.
So the 1K is working with available light. The 10K is working with more people, better audio, and better lighting.
That's pretty much it. Better gear all around and more people to have creative input. And of course, when you get to $100,000, you get a lot more people. I think the crew on that one was about 30 people in total. And in that one, they completely rearranged the office. They had a set designer in to reposition everything. Artworks on the wall were all specially created for the promotional piece. They hired actors to play the same people that were in the second piece, which are the employees of Sandwich Video, and had a lot higher quality graphics, high quality lighting. They did completely black the place out and controlled every bit of the lighting. And some really classy graphics. You got custom written music, not library music, all the polish that you can possibly want. And you had an Arri Alexa for the camera with some very nice primes.
Clearly, the production quality of each of these improved from the low budget to the middle to the high. But what about the message? How did the message feel to you?
I think in every case, the message was really creatively done. And I think I want to really emphasize that the budget doesn't affect the story or the ability to communicate. All three pieces were effective. They were entertaining for the 90 seconds that they were to be watched. They just got more and more polished, I think is the way you'd say it. More and more attention to detail, more people involved, more people looking at what's in and around the frame, and more control over that, and more creative input from more people. The downside of that is lack of constraints.
Well, you run your own company, Philip. Let's pretend that you had the money to afford all three of these, and you were trying to make the decision of how to promote your own software, which is Lumberjack System. Given what you've seen with these 3 documentaries, where would you spend your money?
I would try and go to the $1,000 budget, but I think realistically, if you want to do something that does carry a message of a quality company, then I think the $10,000 budget price point is the sweet point for me. And it's pretty much what the 3 in-house video guys from Wistia came to as well, that the $10,000 gave them polish, and it gave them a look that they didn't otherwise get, and that they didn't get in their own productions, but that the $100,000 gave you, which is 10 times more. So you could do 10 productions at the 10K level for what the $100,000 production cost. It provided a lot of polish and a lot of gloss, but they didn't feel that it provided the best bang for buck. And I think I feel the same way.
Let's take a global look at this just for a second. Wouldn't that be a contributing factor to why budgets are decreasing? Because we can get so much good video quality and good audio for smaller budgets?
Yes, it was interesting to see that, although the quality of the camera went up, the actual additional daily rental on, a C300 versus an Arri Alexa and the Extra Primes wasn't a significant part of the increased budget. What the increased budget went was on set design, it went on costume, it went on actually getting casting and paying actors, it went on a lot more lighting, a lot bigger crew. It didn't necessarily go on better image quality. I think they got more out of the professional grade of the video than they got out of the Alexa over the C300. I think if they put the same money into grading the C300, we would have got a lot closer.
So what's your takeaway as you look at these three? What's the lesson that we can learn from this?
Two lessons that we can learn from this is that, one, story still counts over the technology, always and hopefully always will. But the second was that a lack of constraints actually was considered to be a hindrance to the creative message rather than a help. That the fact that, when you went from $10,000 to $100,000 budget, you just jumped in so many more possibilities. You could do all these crazy things that maybe don't always enhance the story. Maybe superhero movies could learn a lesson from that as well.
One of the things I was impressed with was Claude, who's the director and was the actor for the $1,000. As he said, when you're doing a $1,000 commercial, what you're doing is you're getting rid of everything that doesn't relate to your message. And it really helps to focus you on what is the most important thing you want the audience to learn. He found it creatively challenging because one of the quotes that he had that I saw that I liked a lot was the fact he didn't think you could shoot a video for less than $10,000, and so he took the $1,000 video just as a personal challenge. And he said what it did is it focused so much of my attention down to what's the essential. Mm-hmm. That to me it strikes me as your point. It gets down to what's the real story you're trying to tell.
Yes, and the budget doesn't really impact that as much as you would think it does. Effectiveness of it, having to focus on getting the most succinct message you can with the least amount of investment is always a challenge. And I think we all grow creatively when we're placed into these corners of having to deal with limitations. I think the worst thing for creativity is to have no limitations.
I send nasty emails off to companies that say, remove all the boundaries. Unlimited creativity is about the worst thing you can say to an artist, because now there's so many options, they don't even know where to start.
Yes. Can't even chase down all the creative opportunities they want to, suddenly have even more to chase down. It's like, oh, no, don't do that to me. Give me constraints, give me limitations, because I will thrive within them.
Well, that's the truth. Philip, where's the website people can go to watch these videos?
It's at wistia.com and click the series link and go down to 110-100.
That website is WISTIA, wistia.com. There's a button at the top that says video series. Click that, and they're talking about their product called Soapbox. And Philip, for people that want to keep track of the things that you're doing, where can it go on the web?
PhilipHodgetts.com or lumberjacksystem.com would be great.
That's all one word, Lumberjack System, not systems plural, Lumberjack System. And Philip Hodgetts is the CEO of Lumberjack System. And Philip, we'll talk to you in a couple weeks and figure out what's going to happen at NAB. Thank you so much for your time today.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Larry.
All of us at The Buzz were shocked at the news this week of the passing of Norman Hollyn. Norman was a frequent contributor to The Buzz, a professor at USC, a film and music editor, and an inveterate lecturer at schools around the world. But most of all, he was a good friend. I first met Norman in the summer of 2008. He invited me to lunch, and as we sat down, he said, we should work together. And from that initial conversation came Two Real Guys, a 32-part web series that Norman wrote and we both hosted, teaching the basics of filmmaking. The series took 4 years to fund, develop, and produce, and every few months I'd find myself sitting at Norman's dining room table, collaborating on scripts for the next series of shows. What these dining room table sessions became really was a master class in filmmaking. I focused on technology, but Norman focused on story. And over the years, I realized just how correct Norman was. Norman really loved teaching. He taught his students, he taught our audience, and most of all, he taught me. He taught us to tell stories because he was such a great storyteller himself. Over the years, I invited Norman to guest lecture for my classes. I took more notes than my students and shamelessly stole his ideas for future lectures. He's been on the Buzz 14 times, the most recent being last November. In the tributes I've read to Norman over the last few days, they mentioned his skills as an editor, and he was very skilled with feature films to his credit. His lectures at schools and universities across the globe, and he was teaching in Tokyo when he died. But it was his all-encompassing warmth that I remember the most, his kindness in answering questions, his gentleness working with students or the crew during long days of shooting, and his sense of humor. He had a career to be proud of, but he never took himself that seriously. To his wife, Janet, and daughter, Elizabeth, I send my deepest sympathy. Norman was unique, and he will be deeply missed. If you want to see Norman in action, watch any episode on tworealguys.com. You'll see a true master talking about a subject that he deeply loves, filmmaking. I still hear his voice echoing in my head. It is always about the story. Norman, it was an honor working with you. I want to thank our guests this week, Jennifer Soulé with OWC, Ned Soltz with Red Shark News, Michael Kammes with Bebop Technology, Philip Hodgetts with Lumberjack System, and James DeRuvo with doddleNEWS. There's a lot of history in our industry, and it's all posted to our website at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Here you'll find thousands of interviews, all online and all available to you today. And remember to sign up for our free weekly show newsletter that comes out every Saturday. Talk with us on Twitter at DPBuzz and Facebook at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Our theme music is composed by Nathan Doogie Turner, with additional music provided by smartsound.com. Our producer is Debbie Price. My name is Larry Jordan, and thanks for listening to the Digital Production Buzz. The Digital Production Buzz is copyright 2019 by Thalo LLC.